The morning sun had barely risen when Emma finished another 12-hour night shift at the nursing home. She was exhausted, but exhaustion had become a normal part of her life. At 28 years old, she worked 2 caregiving jobs just to pay rent and cover her younger brother's college tuition after their parents passed away years earlier. Every day, Emma cared for elderly patients with patience and kindness. She believed that every person deserved dignity, whether they were rich or poor. Her coworkers often asked why she smiled so much despite having so many problems. Emma would simply reply, "Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can change someone's entire day." Few people knew she owned only one valuable possession, a vintage Rolex watch. It had belonged to her late father, who received it after serving as a volunteer medic for 30 years. Before he died, he placed the watch in Emma's hand. "Never sell this unless someone's life depends on it," he whispered. Emma treasured those words more than the watch itself. One rainy evening, after finishing work, Emma hurried toward the bus station. The streets were nearly empty because of the storm. As she passed an old alley, she heard a weak voice calling for help. She stopped immediately. Lying on the cold pavement was an elderly homeless man. His clothes were soaked, his breathing was shallow, and his face had turned pale. Most people walked past without looking. Emma rushed to him. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man slowly opened his eyes. "My chest hurts." Emma immediately called an ambulance. Minutes later, the emergency crew arrived. They checked the man before shaking their heads. "He needs emergency surgery immediately," one paramedic explained. "But the nearest private hospital requires a large deposit before admitting patients without identification." Emma's heart sank. She checked her bank account. It wasn't enough. She begged the hospital staff. "Please save him. I'll find the money." The receptionist apologized. "I'm sorry. These are hospital policies." Emma looked at her father's Rolex. Her hands trembled. She remembered her father's final words. "Never sell this unless someone's life depends on it." Tears filled her eyes. Without another second of hesitation, she rushed to a nearby luxury pawn shop. "This watch," she whispered. "How much?" The owner examined it carefully. "It's genuine. I'll give you $20,000. Emma nodded immediately. "I'll take it." Within minutes, she returned to the hospital and paid the deposit. The doctors wheeled the stranger into surgery. Hours passed. Emma sat alone in the waiting room, praying silently. At sunrise, the surgeon finally approached. "You saved his life." Relief washed over Emma's face. She smiled through tears. "That's all that matters." Without waiting to meet the patient, she quietly left for her second caregiving job. She never even learned his name. Meanwhile, the hospital staff finally identified the mysterious patient. The room suddenly became filled with security guards, lawyers, and executives. The elderly homeless man wasn't homeless at all. He was William Harrison, one of the richest billionaires in the country. For weeks, William had secretly traveled across cities disguised as a homeless man. After surviving cancer, he wanted to see how people truly treated strangers without wealth or status. Most ignored him. Some insulted him. A few even stole from him. Only one person had sacrificed everything to save him. The hospital director explained exactly what had happened. "She sold her late father's Rolex to pay for your surgery." William remained silent for a long time. Then he smiled. "Find her." 3 days later, Emma was helping an elderly woman eat breakfast when several black luxury cars stopped outside the nursing home. Everyone gathered near the entrance. Bodyguards stepped out first. Then William Harrison entered wearing an elegant suit. The entire staff froze. Emma looked confused. "Can I help you, sir?" William smiled warmly. "No." He slowly held out the Rolex. "I believe this belongs to you." Emma stared in disbelief. "My watch. I bought it back from the pawn shop." Tears instantly filled her eyes. "You didn't have to," William gently replied, "neither did you." The room became completely silent. He continued, "You believed I was a homeless stranger." "I did. You expected nothing in return. I just wanted you to live." William nodded. "Exactly." The following week, newspapers across the country published an unbelievable headline. "Caregiver sells family Rolex to save stranger." Stranger revealed as billionaire. The story spread everywhere. Television channels invited Emma for interviews. She politely declined every invitation. "I didn't help him for attention." Her humility impressed millions. William, however, wasn't finished. One afternoon he invited Emma to his company headquarters. She arrived nervously. William welcomed her personally. "I owe you more than money." Emma smiled. "You owe me nothing." He laughed. "That's exactly why you deserve everything." William showed her plans for a new charitable foundation. I've spent years building businesses. Now I want to build hope. He looked directly at Emma. I want you to lead it. Emma's eyes widened. Me? You've already proven your heart is qualified. The foundation would provide free medical care, food, housing assistance, and caregiver support for struggling families. Emma hesitated. I've never managed something this big. William smiled. Great leaders aren't chosen because they know everything. They're chosen because they care. After several days of thought, Emma accepted. Her first decision surprised everyone. Instead of opening offices in expensive buildings, she insisted on opening neighborhood care centers where people could receive help without fear or embarrassment. People shouldn't have to beg for kindness, she said. Within months, thousands of families received medical treatment, emergency housing, and financial assistance. Caregivers struggling to pay bills received scholarships and better wages. Elderly people living alone found volunteers who visited them every week. Communities slowly transformed. One afternoon Emma visited the same alley where she had first found William. Another homeless man sat nearby. She handed him food and a warm blanket. He smiled gratefully. You don't recognize me, do you? Emma looked carefully. It was one of the men who had once mocked William during his experiment. Life had become difficult for him after losing his job. Emma simply smiled. Everyone deserves another chance. She helped him enroll in a job placement program through the foundation. Months later, he became a maintenance supervisor at one of their community centers. William watched this quietly. You forgave him. Emma nodded. People make mistakes, but kindness gives them a reason to become better. Years passed. The Harrison Foundation became one of the country's largest charitable organizations. Hospitals partnered with them to ensure emergency patients were never denied treatment because of money. Thousands of caregivers received training, fair salaries, and emotional support. Every employee learned the same principle Emma had lived by. Treat every person with dignity. No exceptions. On the 5th anniversary of the foundation, William invited Emma onto the stage before thousands of guests. He held up the familiar Rolex. This watch reminds me that true wealth isn't measured by what we own. He turned toward Emma. It's measured by what we're willing to give away for someone else's life. The audience stood in thunderous applause. William carefully fastened the Rolex onto Emma's wrist. It belonged to your father. It belongs to your family. And today it represents something even greater. Emma looked at the watch and remembered that rainy night. She had believed she was losing her greatest treasure. Instead, she had discovered her life's greatest purpose. Later that evening, a young volunteer asked Emma one question. If you had known he was a billionaire, would you have done anything differently? Emma smiled gently. No, because kindness should never depend on someone's bank account. The volunteer never forgot those words. Neither did the thousands of people whose lives were changed because one caregiver chose compassion over possessions. Emma had once believed her father's Rolex was his greatest gift. She eventually realized the watch was only a symbol. The real inheritance he had left her was a heart brave enough to put another person's life before her own comfort. And that priceless gift created a legacy that no amount of wealth could ever buy. From that day forward, every new employee at the Harrison Foundation heard the same story during orientation. They learned that one ordinary caregiver, with no fortune and no powerful connections, had transformed countless lives simply by choosing compassion when it mattered most. Her example inspired doctors to treat patients with greater empathy, business leaders to invest in their communities, and young volunteers to believe that even the smallest act of kindness could echo for generations. Emma never considered herself a hero. She continued visiting nursing homes, comforting lonely seniors, and listening to stories others were too busy to hear. Whenever someone praised her, she would quietly smile and say, "The world changes one caring heart at a time." And every time she glanced at the Rolex on her wrist, she remembered that the greatest treasures are never measured in gold or diamonds, they are measured in the lives we choose to save and the hope we choose to give.